So this is everything, basically. We're going to... if I were doing if I were laying out a case, again, this is what you got to do, right? So you just got to begin approaching things like lawyers and not like a community activist, and not that those things aren't wonderful, right? But that's not what lawyers do. Lawyers aren't community activists. They aren't politicians. They aren't philosophers. You with me? It's a business. So what the LSAT is measuring, when Tom White's saying we're measuring how do you think, he really means how do you reason, because that's what we do. We reason. People pay me to reason for a living. And if I'm breaking a case down, well, this is what I'm doing. So work with me here, right? If you just get this down, it's all going to make sense. Because if you want me to address, well, they're going to require you to identify a flaw in an argument. How do I know that? Well, because they've done it on, I don't know anything, but I infer that because they've required you to identify flaws on every exam that's been released, and there are about 88 released exams. From that, Kavish, from that, I infer on the test you take what will be on there. Flaw issues. Do you see it? Talk to me.
Yes.
Could I be wrong? Yes. Is it likely I'm wrong?
No.
No. That's our world. You with me? You're constantly questioning yourself. Because if you don't question yourself, who will? Whoever's on the other side. Right? Everything we do is questioned. Everything's challenged. So, but if I said to you, right, okay, I can, which I can produce to you every LSAT that's been released. And the number, so that would be a fact, right? Because you have a physical exam. And we could establish as a fact that number is well in excess of 80, yes? And would you all agree with me that if in each of those 80 exams we were able to demonstrate that the test taker was required to identify a flaw in an argument no fewer than 5 times on every single one of those exams, would you agree with me that you would infer a likelihood it will be on the test you take? Talk to me.
Yes.
So where's Aristotle? What's complicated about this? And what you should further infer if you saw a trend, which you would, and the trend was, let's say over the past 30 exams, flaw issues on each of those exams were no fewer than 6, and at maybe a high of 12, with a average of 8 per exam. Wouldn't you infer a likelihood that on your exam you're going to see 8 plus or minus 2?
Yes.
Talk to me. And could you be wrong?
Right.
Yeah.
And you're always from now on going to say, I can be wrong. Every single time you do this is where error lies. Every error you've ever made goes from, assuming that these are correct. I mean, sometimes we call things facts that aren't factual, right? But if I stipulate that what you said is correct here, right? When you infer, no matter what you have inferred, you are at risk of being wrong. Kabish?
Yes, sir.
And in my world, being wrong would have meant indicting the wrong person for a crime. You know, I cannot live with that, and God certainly is not going to let me live with that. Kabish? So when you come in here, and when you get to know Jim, Jim's world is, much of Jim's, not only his world, much of his world is in family law. He's a law secretary, Judge Chalathis. And you get, if he's wrong, if he does this poorly, then the child ends up with the wrong parent. Talk to me. You get how serious this is.
Yeah.
Right? And and you want to come here, right? So I don't want to hear about politics. I don't care if you voted for Trump. I don't care if you voted for Clinton. I don't care. You with me? You want to talk about that sometime afterwards, and we just BS, and that's fine. But in this business, you get how your personal views can corrupt this process, right? You start rooting for one parent over the other.
Right. The word truth comes into my mind when you talk about inferred facts, because everybody has their quote unquote own truth.
Well, yeah, I don't. I've actually never been in pursuit of truth. I don't know what truth is. Yeah, what I'm in pursuit of is what reason dictates the outcome. That's what I'm in pursuit of. What does reason, where, I get on the reason bus, right? And then eventually I'm gonna get off the reason bus. But even after I get off the reason bus, can I still be wrong?
Yes.
So it's not true. It's not, you know, again, it's not a formal logic class where you're talking about a truth. Yeah, right. Oh yeah, I've really used the word syllogism a lot in my life as a lawyer. Oh please, go away. You know, can you imagine summing up to jurors saying, well, the syllogism is, I mean, that's not what the thing. Losers. But this is, you know, so here, and I'm getting it right, but when they test you for a flaw issue, it's going to be somewhere along this spectrum, and you're going to be looking for it, and you're going to, again, if you knew your opponent had a really strong backhand, would you prepare for that in advance?
Yeah.
You bet you would. And wouldn't you try to keep the ball on his or her forehand?
Yeah.
Where's Aristotle? So they're going to come at you with this stuff, and this is what they've done, because this is what every attorney. I'm not saying every attorney is aware of this, right? And this is what I did, right? So that doesn't mean but they're doing the same thing, perhaps in a different form, right? But so let's say this rings. So would we agree if this phone rang, would we all agree it's an established fact that we heard a noise? Talk to me.
Yes.
You know, insofar that we don't have a hearing effect or something. But yes.
Yes.
And if I then saw on the screen Vicky Gormanley, would everybody agree we have now seen on the screen the name Vicky Gormanley? Yes? So you get that's now an established fact, yes? If I was then testify that Vicky Gormanley is the name is also the name of my wife, would we now have an established fact that the name is, that either that is my wife's name or whoever is calling shares the same name as my wife? Talk to me.
Yes.
And then I'm going to see a phone number. And then what if I testify that that phone number is a phone number I've seen thousands of times, and I recognize that phone number as the phone number belonging to my wife, Vicky Gormanley? Would we now agree that's an established fact?
Yes.
Any of those could be wrong because our senses could be mistaken, yes?
Yeah.
But it's a slight chance of error. So I go from here, and then I say, without hearing any voice, I say, hi, Vicky. Is that a fair inference?
Mm-hmm.
Is it a fair, talk to me, is it a
Yeah.
fair
Yes.
inference? Is it a reasonable inference?
Yeah.
Could it be wrong?
Yes.
Go figure. Go figure. I could be wrong, son of a bitch. I could be wrong. Get Vicky on the phone, she'll tell you how often I'm wrong. This process is becoming aware of how we reason. It's really that simple. And once you become aware of it, you get better at it. Right? So, as you develop this thing of reasoning, do you get the difference between a fact that is claimed to be established and a fact that is claimed to be inferred? Okay. How often do you think you're going to see the word infer in the LSAT? Or inference? Inference or infer? Oh, you don't think that's what they're tested by any chance, do you? You don't think there are tons of people who, if they saw what I just said, they heard the ring, right? They saw Vicky's name, they saw Vicky's phone number, they wouldn't have a clue why you're asking if it's Vicky. Well, they're not lawyers, right? So, if you don't do this well, since 1962, my brother Edward was older than I am. I'm 65. So Edward's 70 or 71. Since 1962, he has predicted the New York Mets will win the World Series every year. With it? He's been right twice. What do you think he said on both occasions?
I was right.
I told you so. But this has nothing to do with being gifted, being successful, being a wonderful person. You get me? In a million years, this in no way, manner, shape, or form meant to be derogatory. But would you agree with me? He's probably not that old good. He's probably not that good at the art of inference, at least when it comes to baseball. Talk to me.
That's what he won.
But don't we all know people like that? You with me? And again, in a million years, this is not to diminish. It's thank God you're not a lawyer, because what would you have been telling your client? You know, I'd be telling my client that, no, you need to take 3 to 9, you know, and the guy didn't do anything, you know, well, you know, that's not a good thing. So, being aware of this step is essential if you're going to do what we do for a living. Now, when you say that carbon emissions contribute to climate change, could such a, have you heard such a position?
Yes.
Talk to me.
Yes.
Yeah, I said it all the time.
Right. Have you ever examined the position?
Yes.
Have you done this?
No.
Then you've not examined it. You've not examined it. There's so many ways you can go with this. If you're going to take the position that carbon emission, now you get everything is words, you with it? So now you have to be responsible for your own words. If you're going to say that carbon emissions are responsible for climate change, don't you have to defend the position that nothing else is responsible for climate change?
Right.
Talk to me.
Right.
Okay, so in other words, now it's not just I get to say what I say now. Every action has a counteraction. You with me? So if you're now going to say, so now I have to ask you what you mean, and I shouldn't have to ask you what you mean because you're going to be a what? A lawyer, and you're going to speak with specificity, which means I don't have to ask you what you mean, right? Because if I'm asking you what you mean in court, that's not a good thing, because it looks to the jurors like you're clueless, right? So what I'm trying to get to you is when you say something must be, so if you take a position like, carbon emissions are solely responsible for climate change, doesn't that require you to exclude anything else having any impact on climate change?
Yes.
So wouldn't you now have to be able to defend the proposition that urbanization has nothing to do with climate change?
Mm-hmm.
And how much research have you done on that?
0.
Then go away. You with me? Does that mean your conclusion is wrong? No. Does it mean it's not well reasoned? Yes. That's this business. You with me? So it is from now on, and it's very heavily tested on the LSAT, is when you take a position, there's a derivative. In other words, if I say it's heads, what else have I said?
It's not tails.
Bingo. And that's what this is about. It's not tails. Every position you take requires you to defeat a counterposition. And in this business, there's somebody at the other table with a counterposition. So you got to lose your. You can have your politics. You can have your worldview. That's fine, all right? But this is just the business of reasoning, and that has no worldview. Right? So do you get? If I go back to my hypothetical and I say hi, Vicky, when I get to that and I say hi, Vicky, haven't I assumed there's nobody but Vicky on that phone?
Yes.
And don't you think that's what they do on the LSAT? In other words, if I'm going to test you for an assumption, well, an assumption is an inference you drew was not contradicted by another inference. Yep. If I'm still reasoning and I say, well, I expect to hear Vicky's voice, well, if I expect to hear Vicky's voice, wouldn't it be fair to say that the conclusion I'm heading towards is going to be Vicky? Yes?
Yes.
But if I say I expect to hear Vicky's voice, doesn't that suggest I'm waiting to hear Vicky's voice?
Yes.
So the reasoning process is dynamic, right? And so long as you're in that reasoning process, you're not obligated to defend a conclusion because you're still in that process, right? The conclusion is if I went over and turned the lights out, that's sort of a metaphor for a conclusion. The conclusion is when you get here, right, you're done. You're done. Now again, in our world, there are standards of proof, right? So done in law may mean something's just more likely than not, right? It's a civil case, right? But that means all I have to show to you guys, right, is more likely than not, right? In the world I've been in, that's not the standard. In the world I've been in, the standard is proof beyond a reasonable doubt, which is substantially more challenging, which then encourages one to stay on this path longer. Now just think about it. If you have a conclusion, don't you want this category to be as narrow as possible?
Yes.
Yeah, do you guys get it? Like, have you picked up on the fact that you don't know what you don't know? Right? And has that come back to bite you in the ass in life, or is it just me?
All the time.
Right? But you want to be lawyers now, right? Well, so that's not an option. You know, what? You're going to say to your client, my bad. You know, it's like not how this works, right? You're now aware of what don't I know. So in this process of gathering evidence, you're very much aware of, you know, I've really got to get that category as small as possible. And what happens if these folks know what you don't know? Capiche? So this fourth category is, again, in law, there's always another voice. There's somebody on the other side. You with me? You don't just get to go on, well, you can, right? But if you ignore contrary evidence, which is human nature, you know, you just don't want to hear it. Right? It's like that's why I have a third finger. You know, I just don't want to hear it. Go away. Right? Okay. But would you agree in this business you have to understand the other side? Talk to me.
Yes.
So if you're on that carbon climate change thing, don't you want to go out there and see if somebody's written on the impact of urbanization? Talk to me.
Yes.
And if you find that the impact of urbanization is it does lead to some warming, might that cause you to adjust to a more conservative conclusion that maybe carbon is partially responsible, but not wholly responsible? Talk to me.
Yes.
And then you're going to get yelled at as a denier. That's okay. We're deniers. But do you get, all you're doing is saying, where does the evidence take me? So this is what they're testing on. All right. And I can go over each and every issue they raise on the LSAT, and it falls in right here. So when I want to test you, does this part make sense? Talk to me. Okay. And there's so much to this test. I mean, again, it's like being in that locker room the first time, right? What do you think how much time this week do you think the 49ers and the Chiefs spent figuring out what they're going to do tomorrow? The Super Bowl. How much time do you think they spent in the locker room this week, on the field, practicing what they're going to do?
The whole 2 weeks.
Yeah. And how much time do you think this season they spent preparing for this day?
The entire season.
And how about in the preseason, preparing for this day? Talk to me.
Every day.
So if you don't love what you do, it's not going to work because you're going to come up against me, right? And again, it's not that I'm the sharpest pencil in the box. I'm not. You're going to come up against me, and I'm going to be the most prepared pencil in the box. And if you're not prepared, you're going to have a very challenging time. See, when you meet Jim, you'll say, oh crap, he doesn't have to do any work, he's just really freaky bright. But I'm not there. So, You know, so this is, you know, the other terms here. That's the test. The test is not an academic test. It's a psychometric situational test. Now stop and digest this. It goes to all those things you're going to tell them. It's going to be all those phone calls I get where I'm at the other end going like this, you know, because I'm hearing all the things that, no. You're already going in there with the world on your shoulders because you're a victim. I can't do this. I can't. No, I can't. I can't. There's not enough time. You know, if I had more time, no, I can't. No, it's not fair. You know, and I'm not good at the standardized test. What the hell are you going to do in the bar exam? It's really hard. I've tried. It's really hard to be a lawyer and be a victim all the time. You know, one, doesn't sell well with your clients, right? And two, I kind of think people are looking for solution, not excuses. You with me? It's psychological. So the test is set up here to reflect the realities of the practice of law. So think about this for a second. Would it be, again, if I'm going to say one thing, I think the thing I hear most often is the time factor. Is that fair? Does that reflect? Talk to me. That there's not enough time. You're not talking to me.
Points on the table.
Okay. Do you agree if you take the position there's not enough time, you're a victim?
Yes.
You're a victim. Right? If we use a different analogy, would it be fair to say you're seeing the glass as half empty?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Is there any reason why you can't see it half full? Huh. So let me drill down a little bit on that, right? Because I'm a lawyer, and I think I have plenty of time. I think I have an abundance of time. 35 minutes per section? Beautiful, beautiful. I would prefer it to be 25. I would prefer to have to complete 6 sections instead of 5. Bring it on. You do this when you get there, right? If you really want to scare everybody. Go like this. They'll be handing out the tablets, right? I want one from my left hand. I want one from my right hand. I'm ambidextrous. Let's make it happen, Chuckles. Let's make it happen. Let's go. Let's go. But you get that psychology. Talk to me. And you get that's what your client's going to need to see. And I'm not saying it happens overnight. Right? It may depend on your personality. I've seen people who are just like freak confident, and I'm not. Right? Okay. So on this issue of time, do you kind of think being a lawyer is kind of a calculating business?
Yes.
Kind of clinical, might I say cutthroat? Sorry, I get goosebumps at that. So you're sitting in the exam center. There's a person to your left, a person to your right, a person in front of you, and a person behind you, yes? And you open up the first logical reasoning section, and how much time do you have to complete that section? 35 minutes. And how much time do they have to complete that section?
35 minutes.
Oh, go figure, son of a bitch. So I thought you were saying, because when you say you didn't have enough time, I think, oh, that's because the person next to me has more time. But you're not saying that. Oh, no, so you're just a big baby. Because don't you want the person sitting next to you to feel there's not enough what? Time. Because then they're back on their heels psychologically, yes? That's beautiful. That's when you punch them. They go over like cardboard. But you get it. So much of this is women. I infer that a significant percentage of students taking the test really feel they don't have enough time. Does that seem like a reasonable inference? And I further infer that that feeling is not helpful to the person taking the test. Is that fair to infer? Talk to me.
Yes, sir.
And this is just, this is just like regular human stuff, right? Oh, but that's what law is. So I'm saying, well, no, wait a minute. I want them, I mean, it's nothing personal, right? But basically I want them to feel that way. Right? Because I plan to outperform them, and they may be brighter than I am. So I really want them to feel that way if they're brighter than I am. Now, would it be fair to say that while you cannot get additional time, would it be fair to say you have all the time in the world to develop a plan?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Oh. And when you think, before I've tried a case, you think maybe I've had a plan? You think it's pretty common for lawyers to have plans? Talk to me.
Yes.
Do you think it's pretty common for lawyers to not have enough time? You want to try a case with me? You want to get up there and watch the judge stare at you and say, move on, counselor? How about when you cross-examine somebody you've never seen before, which happens all the bloody time? How about I just say, oh, I can't do this, it's not fair, you didn't tell me he was coming in. Well, that's going to go over real big with the jury. No, it's not fair. No, I want to know more. I want to depose that person. Well, you're not going to depose them, the person's going to come in and testify. Do you get law is kind of an aggressive place? And again, this is trial stuff, right? So it's not tiny percent of attorneys are trial attorneys. But it's as stressful. In other words, my wife is a healthcare, Vicky's a healthcare attorney, and she works for a very prestigious firm, and she has an extremely high pressure job. It would not be unusual for her to be on the phone with general counsel of the largest pharmaceutical corporations on the planet. How forgiving do you think they are of their time? And particularly in that they're retaining a firm that's very, it doesn't matter, it's on the border, but when you're hiring a prestigious firm, would it be fair to say you expect to be able to cut to the chase and there is no BS? What kind of pressure do you think that puts on the person on the other end of the phone? You with me? It's no different. It's no different. So whether it's, if you want to be successful, you don't want to be successful. But if you want to be successful with this, pressure and time come with the turf. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Well, that's one element of a psychometric test, right? That if you can't do that, and that's fine. Again, you can live a full life and a wonderful life, but you probably shouldn't be an attorney. So the time thing is, well, now wait a minute, I'm going to make it an advantage because I'm going to have a plan. You see, would it be fair to say that there's nothing preventing us from learning what they've tested in the past, what they test consistently, and how heavily it's weighed, right? If I go back to that flaw issue, right? Is there anything preventing us from establishing the likelihood flaw issues will be on your test and the probability of the number of times it will be on your test? Is there anything that prevents you from learning that other than your own diligence? Talk to me. Oh. Go figure. And you're competing with people who you're just like tricks and shortcuts to find some way around the test. You keep doing that. No problem. Please do. Send the word out to all your friends to do the same thing. But that's the way it is because I'm going to win. But I'm not going to win with smoke and mirrors. I'm going to win by out preparing. And so I'm saying you got to want, in case I haven't made this clear, you got to want this. Right? Because then you do this, you say, well, wait a minute. In terms of developing my plan, again, we're going to get into this, and once we hit next week, we're in the test. You with me? This is the one class in the locker room, right? Next week, no more locker room, right? But I don't think you can address the test until you understand the test, and that's the purpose of today. So would you agree with me that time is something you're going to, and this thing, I see, because I've been a lawyer so long, it's been a while since I've been a law school student. Do you think law school students often feel that they don't have enough time?
Yes.
Talk to me.
Yes.
And do you think that law school students often feel that there's too much pressure? Yeah, but if they're going to graduate from law school, would it be fair to say they're going to have to deal with those two psychological things? Okay. And here they are on the law school admissions test. There's not enough time if that's the way you process it, and there's too much pressure if that's the way you process it. What's that psychological profile of that person going into the test?
Loser.
Like, go away, go away. And it's all in your control. None of this is outside your control. Why would you ever go in there saying to yourself, there's not enough time? Is it just me, or maybe that makes me a lawyer? It's an opportunity. And not enough time for what? What is there not enough time for? Even if you were to agree, because you want to be lawyers, right? You still want to be lawyers? Go figure. So when somebody says there's not enough time, my follow-up question to that is for what? And they look like, why are you asking me that? Well, would you agree with me that there's enough time in the logical reasoning section, that there's ample time to answer 5 questions? Talk to me. Okay, but you just said there wasn't enough time. So there isn't enough time for what? Because now you said, well, there is enough time, didn't you? Talk to me.
Yeah.
What's the objective? So aren't you really saying there's not enough time to complete 25 questions? Yeah, talk to me. When you don't talk to me, I don't know if you're agreeing or not.
Correct.
Is it? Well, then why don't you complete your damn sentence? All right? And say, well, what I'm saying is there's not enough time to complete the entire section. Thank you. I now understand why you're wrong. Because when you say that, there's not enough time to complete the entire section, haven't you assumed you need to complete the entire section? Oh, well, maybe that's something we should examine. You don't think we learn anything about that from understanding the nature of a psychometric test, do you? Yeah, we do. Now, what you can do is, I had no idea, but you can actually search psychometric testing, and there's quite a bit of information out there about it. I didn't know it at the time. I took a CIA exam when I came out of college, to be a covert agent. And I'm taking this test, right? And it's like, how fast can you drive? What has that got to do with what I know about Namibia? It's like, like, hello, right? Well, they didn't care what I knew about Namibia. They didn't care that I knew quite a bit about international relations. They just wanted to know how fast I wanted to drive. That's a psychometric test you get. Is going to the psychological qualities of the individual applicant. This is a psychometric test. So, one characteristic of this is, other than there is enough time for approximately 2.5% of all test takers to complete the section. So there is enough time means you could answer all 25 questions and do really well on the 25 questions. Is that correct? Talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
And when you can do that, what school do you go to? Yeah, you're a freak. You're a bright freak, right? But you're a freak. When you meet Jim, you'll say, maybe, but you gotta be like, really a freak. Okay, I'm not a freak. Well, I'm not in different ways. But stop and understand what you're up against. That is a perfectly fine objective for 2.5% of all test takers. Do you get that? In no way, manner, shape, or form would I seek to discourage anyone who has the capacity from achieving that objective. But the way the test is designed, since it is not academic, you can't study for it. You can't. You have to prepare for the LSAT. And again, these words have implications, yeah. I haven't studied for a damn thing since 1981. I got my degree or something, in international relations. That's the last time I studied. I'm no good at studying. I think I'm great at preparing. It's an entirely different preparation. There are 2 things I love in terms of content: law and cooking. And they're the same. They are creative. They require preparation. They require concentration, but it's not studying. Studying is memorizing, a lot of it. So, in order to do this, don't you have to think about realistically what you're able to accomplish? And doesn't that require, first of all, you get familiar with the text? Does that make sense? Okay. And don't you then have to have an objective? Like, would it be fair to say, you're not going to have it today, you may, but it's likely going to change. Would it be fair to say that if your objective was to attend, I'm going to use Pace Law School because that's where I went. Pace is analogous to Albany. But again, there are no, nothing's a perfect match. But you get, I would have different metrics if I wanted to get into Pace with a lot of money than I would if I wanted to get into Fordham with a lot of money, than I would if I wanted to get into Columbia with a lot of money. Talk to me.
Yes.
So don't you have to make that decision in advance? Or isn't that what directs your plan? Don't you have to, in our business, you have to have a theory of the case, right? So if I'm trying a case, I have to have a theory. I have to be able to explain to the jurors, hi, this is why this really insane thing was going on. That's my theory of the case, right? Well, you need to have a theory of the case, which is, what's your theory? Are you going to Columbia? Then you got to be able to do that. And that's fine, just do it, right? But if you're trying to go to Fordham, but you act like you're going to go to Columbia, you're in a lot of trouble. Because if you're capable of going to Fordham, implicitly then, if that's the highest, if that's the best you can do, if your reach exceeds your grasp, where are you going? In other words, if you're trying to do more than you're capable of, you're going to do less than you could have accomplished. Right? I've got to try the case I can prevail on. I'm not going to give up the perfect for the good. I'm going to try, I'm going to try what I can succeed on. And I'm going to push the bounds, right? But they're going to be bounds. So you say, well, if I'm released from this, if I'm released from this burden of answering the whole test, but the person behind me and in front of me, behind me, and to the sides, if they are trying to complete the whole test and they don't know this, don't I have more time than they do? Oh, you bet. Now I'm going to break that down. And again, I can't stress, this is whether it's tennis in advance, yours was, I'm sorry? Lacrosse in advance. This is what it is. You're sitting down in advance trying to figure, don't you need to understand what the strengths and the weaknesses of the other players? And don't you adjust your plan based on their abilities? And doesn't that come through reason, not athleticism? The athleticism will be on the field, right? But the reason precedes the athleticism. So how terrible would it be? Well, let me move that up. How horrible would it be? Now, it depends on where you are. Look like that's going to erase well. Could it be the case that when you're preparing, when you're deliberating, you get that everybody's plan is unique to each individual? Talk to me.
Yes.
Right? There's not one size fits all. So do you think it could be the case that there are one or more people in the room for whom achieving a 75 out of 100 will be their target? Talk to me. And nobody in college would do that. Because 75 out of 100 would be what, a C or a C plus or something like that, right? But that's not how this test works. So you say, okay. So if I wanted to do this, that's fun. I'm just glad you're here. So this is what you do, because you're preparing, right? So this is your trial. Okay. So if we establish the goal of scoring a 75, that would mean at a sample test I'm looking at, a 75 would be a 161. Are there some people in this room who could live with the shame of a 161?
Yes.
Are there some people, could you do that?
Yeah.
But that's what's a 75. That's not 100, that's a 75. And wouldn't you want to know the implications of a 161 for the school you wanted to attend?
Yeah, sure.
Where's Aristotle? I'm saying this really is all down to earth. So again, you should ask Persia when she comes in. Say, Persia, what would happen if I got a 161, right? So, and see what she says. But you get what I'm saying is we're talking about 75. So I can speak, and again, I don't speak for any school, but I mean, that's what I do. So if you want to do a plug school like Pace with a 161, and you didn't have my GPA, because I haven't told you my GPA. I went to Lehman College in the Bronx, City University of New York. And I graduated with a 2.6, that's a 2, a 2.68 GPA in the drinking problem. Go figure. So do you get a GPA is not going to keep you out of, it's not going to help, but you get it's not going to keep you out. So with a 161, roughly, if you're talking about 50,000 as tuition, I think it's beyond safe to say that you would not pay 40,000 of that. As long as you're talking about a regular GPA, talk to me. Could you live with that shame? Could you live with the shame of you'll be paying less to go to law school than it cost me to put my daughters through a private high school? Could you do that? Would that be okay? But you don't need 100 to do that. And I can lower those numbers, and you don't need, you know, if, does anybody know what the median score on this test is? Median raw score.
150.
Yeah, but what's the raw score?
The raw score. I don't know.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that not everybody in this room is completely prepared to take this test at this moment?
Yes.
Right. Because you know what I'm getting. Would it be fair to say, with respect to the test, this category is quite large for you guys? Like if you're hearing what I'm saying for the first time, right? Would it be fair to say that reflects where you were, right, which is the facts are unknown, and where you are is that you've acquired that information? Talk to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what clients are going to be paying you to do. So the median raw is going to be about a 59. So if we jacked it up to a 60, which would be higher than the median, but like on this test, a 60 would get you a 153. So on the test I'm looking at here, which is exam 78, which is June 16, the median on this test would have been a 58. 58, think about this for a second. So if you achieve the median score, and you just have a decent GPA, and you wanted to go to law school in August, where would you go what would happen in August? Yeah, you go to law school. Do you get it? You can get a 58 on this test, and you will be admitted to law school. Do you get that? Talk to me. Because it's again, just take it, it's sweeping away the generalizations and the incomplete information and saying, well, no, really, what do I have to do? Well, if you want to be a lawyer, you have to go to law school. Doesn't mean, you know, you prefer not to pay a lot of money. But let me ask you this. What if you find, and the LSAT's certainly not a perfect measure by any stretch, but what if you find that you can score well enough to get into law school, but not well enough to get a lot of money? You still get some money, certainly the median you get some money. What's going to happen at the end of your first year in law school? In other words, when you have a class rank, what do you think you're going to be able to do if the class rank is higher than your LSAT score would have projected?
Reapply for scholarship.
Yeah, you renegotiate. It's a business. It's an absolute business. And it'll work in reverse. In other words, most of the scholars, again, you can ask Persia about this because it's different at each law school, but generally speaking, scholarships are extended based on performance. So if you send out, if you give scholarships to 70% of your incoming students, but the condition of the scholarship is that it is maintained for the top 50%, there are dead there are some who are walking dead. You with me? Because that doesn't work. So again, you want to get into law school. If you want to do this the rest of your life, let's get into law school. Preferably, let's get into the law school you want to get into. And even more preferably, let's get into the law school you want to get into with money. And that's the LSAT. So do you get that if you were here, wouldn't you now have couldn't you now make adjustments in your plan? Because you're not trying to get 100, you're trying to get a 75. So what if, and again, what if I say, well, I'm pretty strong in logical reasoning. I mean, you're going to have different strengths and weaknesses. So for reading comprehension is really a challenge if you have not been challenged. In other words, if you've gone to a school where you've not been reading reasonably sophisticated material, you're going to get a wake-up call. You do want to be lawyers, right? Talk to me.
Yes, sir.
Okay. How would you be a lawyer if you weren't able to read reasonably complex text? I tried. I so tried. Every turn I tried. It doesn't work. It can come over time. And the LSAT's not measuring how I read. It's measuring how an incoming law school student, they want to read, right? Nevertheless, it's challenging. But just to play this thing out about having a plan, okay. What would happen if instead of answering 25 of the logical reasoning questions, your plan was to answer 20? Talk to me. Is that conceivable?
Yes.
But if you answer 20, I know they give you less time if you answer 20. Is that right?
No.
No.
Son of a bitch. You mean they're still giving me 35 minutes? But I'm only answering 20 questions. So let me see. They give you 1 minute and 20 seconds per question. So if I don't answer 5 questions, could say 6 minutes. Yes, talk to me. Man, I could feel this. Son of a bitch. How about this? Have I mentioned it's a psychometric test? And that it would be helpful to you to go learn something about psychometric testing in particular, right? But here's one of the deals. How do I get it so that only 2.5% of the folks can complete it? I create more and more complicated situations. Here's what it is, right? So if I want to do this in college, right? And I want to produce failure. If I want to produce failure in college, if I want to produce success, maybe I'm in a history class and I'll test who was the president of the who was the president during the Civil War? You think most students would kind of get that one right? They may even get both of them right, the Southern and the But that's for success. But if I want failure, how about if I do this? From what state did Lincoln's second vice president come from? Would you agree with me? I might get a higher fail rate on that.
Yeah.
Since a bunch of people are saying, son of a bitch, I didn't know he had a second vice president. Right? Talk to me. So what I'm saying, your college experience, right, in terms of, it's really, you can say anything situational, right? But in terms of how success and failure is calibrated, I'm just asking you something that was remote, that we touched on one day for 7 minutes in a 45-hour course. That's not the LSAT. Failure here and success all come from here. To achieve this, so that only 2.5% of test takers can be successful. Defining successful is completing the test. What they do is there's a level of difficulty. And the level of difficulty runs from 1 through 5. So every question on your test has appeared on prior LSAT. So you guys with this? Everything you're looking at, some other poor bastard looked at before you saw it, right? They got all that data, and then what they did is, where 63% of test takers got it right, then they assign it a level 1, right? Where 63% get it wrong, that's assigned a level 5. You get it, right? Now, they have done that in every test, so I can represent to you as a fact, that is how every test has been administered. Now, based on that, would you infer a high likelihood that's how your test is going to be administered?
Yes.
Okay. Could we all be wrong?
Yes.
Yeah, just hug that statement, will you? Whenever you feel just so smug, right? You're just as smug can be, right? Hug the proposition, you can always be wrong. Every error arises from the failure to make this jump. So, for me to accomplish this, right, I have to have a distribution of things that are more straightforward and more remote. So if I want to make something straightforward, if I give you an issue that I've tested tons of times before, and I've released that material, would you have access to it? Talk to me.
Yeah.
And would it be fair to say that some issues can be more straightforward than other issues?
Yes.
So if I ask you to identify a flaw in an argument, that's going to be a little bit more straightforward than to ask you to identify a parallel flaw in an argument. Talk to me, yes?
Yeah.
So correlations are, well, they're here and here, we begin to develop the correlation of level of difficulty, just a correlation. The law. You still want to be lawyers?
Yes.
How are you going to do as a lawyer if you don't read the law the way it was written? Have you ever seen a law you don't agree with? Could that happen?
Yeah.
Could you have a law you just think is stupid? And it's stupid. Okay, what is it? I mean, you may think it's stupid, but what is it? The law. You with me? So here's the deal. Nobody cares what you think. Nobody gives a rat's ass what you think or what I think. You with me? What does the law say? You will read textually. And if you cannot do this, you will not do well in this test. So in the writing of the law, which is the argument, in logical reasoning, this is the argument. You're reading the argument. Would it be fair to say if you don't understand the law, you can't solve? Yes?
Yes.
So can I write things that are straight? Can the first sentence of what I write be something like, young people typically drive red cars and drive too quickly? Could that be my first sentence?
It could, yeah.
And would it be fair to say that a representative reader would understand what the writer wrote? Talk to me.
Yes.
And would that be consistent with the proposition that the writer intends it to be understood?
Yes.
Could your first sentence be the dichotomy of whether altruism is appropriate in a valueless society is now in dispute? I don't know. Do you really think the writer used that sentence in that law to communicate clearly to the reader? But to this person, right, the geek a la mode, right? That person's looking at it like, yeah, of course, yeah, I know the answer to that, you know. Do you get, if I don't understand the law, I can't solve. You with me? Talk to me. It's all Iraq. It's all bloody Iraq, right? And they just put it up there. So if I understand the issue and I understand the law, doesn't that mean I'm going to be able to perform analysis? Because the writer had to do that. So if I'm going to test you on a flaw, don't I have to embed a flaw? Right, wherever you're going to read, if I'm going to say identify a flaw, what do I have to put in there? Flaw. Gosh, go figure. And do you think that, and we will, flaws come out of baskets? The writer's test is identical to the way they teach in law school. In other words, if I want to test you, and I will test you, on the difference between correlation and causation, and you're saying, because you haven't gone to law school yet, so you're saying, well, what's that got to do with law school? Everything. That's tort law. If I don't know the difference between the coincidence, the correlation, and causation, I'm certainly not going to practice tort law, right? I mean, it's critical, it's essential, it's a gravamen of tort law, and it's on the LSAT. Of course it's on the LSAT, it's the law school admissions test, right? But, so if I start off with the principle, right, I'm going to test you on causation and correlation, well, then I have to give you an example of somebody mistaking correlation for causation, right? Yes? So as you're reading it, if you're reading, you're performing analysis, and this is one of the things you're looking for, because the issue is identify flaw. That immediately tells you, you look for A, B, C, D, E, F, G, because those are the flaws that are tested. Oh, go figure. And if you start reading in the first sentence information about a group, well, group is correlation. If the conclusion has to do with a member in that group, well, wait a minute, a member in the group is causation. So if you're talking about people who smoke or something, right? And you're talking about this group that smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day for 30 years. And there's this other group who did no smoking at all. And Timmy was in the group that smoked 3 packs of cigarettes for 30 years. And I just found out that Timmy has cancer. So, does smoking cause the cancer? No.
What kind of cancer is to me?
Yeah, but that correlation causation. Well, but that's going to be a test. So I'm saying you're going to change the way you read, which is going to come as you're more informed to what the test is testing. Right. So when I want a level 5, I just move these around. I can make the conclusion really hard because I can present you with answer choices that are very challenging. But basically, what's going on? How about this? A flaw is a fatal defect. Fatal, you with me? It's fatal. So if it's fatal, and the writer is testing you on identifying a flaw, notwithstanding the argument could have multiple flaws, if it's fatal, how many answer choices can I present you with to identify a flaw? You have 5 answer choices, right? I say identify a flaw. A flaw is fatal. How many of the 5 choices can be fatal? 1. So if it's a level 1, and there can only be 1 credited answer, right? And you're reading it, and you've really got the argument. This is young people, rent cars, and insurance companies, right? And you look at answer choice B, and answer choice B, the language in B is the language your mind has already produced. Whack that mole. Whack that mole. Do you get solving a level 1 does not require as much time as solving a level 5? Talk to me. The psychometric nature of it is it's very hard to be a lawyer and be chronically indecisive. Does that kind of make sense? I mean, there are things you can do in life and procrastinate till you die. Law is probably not one of them. You with me? So imagine you were so prepared that 1, you knew there could only be 1 credit. If you have only 1 credited answer choice, right, that can be the answer, why are you reading all 5? What don't you have enough of? Well, what does the person next to you not have enough of? Time. And couldn't one of the reasons they not have enough time because they're reading all 5 answer choices when there can only be 1? And isn't that consistent with the psychometric, with the quality of, yeah. So, you don't know this yet, but I do, right? In terms of the distribution here, if you take 100 questions across all the sections, that's going to be about 40 of them. That's going to be about, 1 and 2 are going to be about 40 of them. And 4 or 5 are going to be about 45 of them, right? Doesn't that give you and let's lowball and say 35, it'll be higher than that. But if you had reason to believe, infer, that 35 of these questions were level 1 or level 2 in advance of taking the test, wouldn't that suggest that they were designed so that when you had finished this process, you would have the answer choice in your mind? Talk to me. Because that's what the writer is doing. Okay. And then where an issue is that there can only be 1 answer, well, then you whack the mole. Well, what if you can now whack the mole in a logical reasoning section? What if you whack the mole 6 times? Now, they give you a minute and 20 seconds, right? But what if on